Hello, profilers! It's time for our weekly rendezvous.
The podcast that shares with you true cases of French crime.
So, today, what is the story?
A girl missing in the northwest region of France. All of the events leading up to her disappearance paint a very strange picture of her young teenage life. Welcome to episode 3, Lost Girl.
Enjoy the story!
Wednesday, January 19th, 2011. Our story begins in Pornic, a town in the French department of Loire-Atlantic, where Jessica Perrais, an 18-year-old high school student, gets ready for school. At 7 a.m., as usual, she leaves her house to head to school. At around 50 meters from her home, Jessica sees something strange on the road. She decides to take a closer look and sees a red scooter knocked over near a ditch. She immediately recognizes the scooter as it belongs to her and also to her twin sister, Laetitia. Panicked, she turns around and runs directly back to her house to ask her sister for an explanation. But when Jessica goes into her sister's bedroom to wake her up, she is nowhere to be found. The young girl, shocked by the absence of her sister, tells her foster parents, who then decide to call the police immediately. The police arrive a few minutes later and find the scooter overturned on the side of the road. They note a few scratches, but nothing serious. At first glance, the police think that the scooter has perhaps been in an accident with another car and could have had a collision with another vehicle, and perhaps this is why it slid a few meters. After a closer look, they confirm this theory and think Laetitia may have been transported to a hospital. But it's not as straightforward as that. They still have questions about the state of the two wheels. It should have been much more damaged for this kind of small scooter after a collision. They notice, for example, that the lights and the mirrors are not broken, even though they are very fragile on this type of transport. The keys are still in the ignition. They also find shoes and papers in the surrounding area.
What's surprising to the police is that if the emergency services had intervened, they wouldn't have left all this stuff in the middle of the road. The police were also struck by the absence of blood, which is quite rare in an accident involving motorcycles. They called all the local hospitals, but there was no sign of the girl.
The police then speculate that it might have been staged. They could be facing a runaway situation. But there are some inconsistencies surrounding this hypothesis. According to several witnesses, Laetitia was a young girl, full of life, with a bright future ahead of her. She had a job and a boyfriend. The police decide to rule out this possibility. The final hypothesis, and the one that everyone fears, is the criminal theory, and that this is in fact a kidnapping. Let's try to understand the tumultuous past of the two girls. They are the children of Sylvie Larcher and Frank Perret. But the couple was a very fragile one, notably because of Frank's problems with alcohol and violence against his partner. In 1993, when the twins were barely a year old, the couple separated, but never really severed ties, as Sylvie couldn't let go of her ex, the girl's father, and was still in love, in spite of his violent tendencies and excessive angry outbursts. His anger was even directed at his own daughters. But in 1995, Frank had crossed a line. He raped his ex-wife, threatening her with a cutter. He attempted to start again later, but this time, Sylvie resisted, and she managed to lock herself in the bathroom to call the police. The man was found guilty and sentenced to 5 years of prison, 2 under probation. He would be incarcerated 2 years later in 1997. As for Sylvie, she was deeply affected by this whole incident. Already emotionally fragile, she gradually sank into a depression and was no longer able to care for her 2 girls. The little girls were then placed into a foster home for minors.
A few months later, they would be placed in a foster family with Gilles and Michel Patron. The foster parents were very close to the young girls, providing the loving home like the 2 girls had always dreamed of having. A few years later, everything was going better for the girls. They even reconnected with their biological father, Frank Perrais, who had since gotten out of prison and who they have kept in touch with.
When the police announced that she had been abducted, it's not only a shock for her foster family, but also for the biological family. Frank Perrais wasted no time. He immediately started searching for his daughter in the places she usually frequented, but with no luck. The investigators raced to find her. They questioned the maximum number of people. Gilles Patron, her foster father, was the first to be questioned. He detailed the night of January 18th to the 19th, the night of Laetitia's kidnapping. He explained to the police that he hadn't slept that night, waiting for Laetitia to come home. At 1:25 a.m., he heard the sound of a car door slam, so he went to the window to try and see what was happening. He decided to go outside, in his yard, to try and catch a glimpse of something, but everything seemed normal to him. It was only the next day that he discovered the scooter when Jessica told him. He explained that the sound of the door slamming that he had heard could correspond to the moment of the kidnapping. When the police call on search dogs, the dogs stay at the scene of the accident, which alerts the police that the young girl was taken in another vehicle. Helicopters and forensic teams were deployed to try and find even the smallest clue. The police would then decide to retrace the young girl's steps over the previous 24 hours. They would try to answer this key question: who had been the last person to see Laetitia? Shortly before 11 a.m., Laetitia got ready to walk the 3 kilometers to her workplace, where she would be working her shift until 3 p.m. But from that very moment, her daily routine would change. Laetitia sent a message to her foster mother, Michel Patron, saying that she would be staying in La Bennerie en Retz, the town where she worked, during her 3-hour break. An interesting lead for the police, as this was an unusual event for the young girl. They started to dig deeper into this lead, and several people would come forward with an interesting testimony. they were adamant that they had seen the girl with a man that they didn't recognize. A man in his 30s, over 5 foot 9 inches tall, with slicked back hair and a relatively pale complexion. Stephen, a young 18-year-old guy and Laetitia's colleague, reported hearing this man yell at the young girl that he would be the one who came to pick her up that night at the end of her shift. According to witnesses, they assumed that Laetitia and this man were very close, as they hugged several times, a gesture usually reserved for couples in France. For the witnesses closest to her, this would raise suspicions, as at that time, Laetitia had a boyfriend named Kevin. Usually, around 10 p.m., at the end of her shift, the girl would go directly home, following Stephen. But that night in question, she informed Stephen that it wouldn't be the case, and not to worry, because she had other plans and would be going home much later. The young man, not asking any questions, went home alone. However, while he was riding his scooter home, a white Peugeot 106 came speeding towards him, forcing him to stop. The driver rolled down his window, and Stephen recognized him. It was the man Laetitia was seen with in front of the hotel. He was annoyed and seemed very upset. He asked where Laetitia was. Stephen responded that she was still at work, and the man sped off in the direction of the hotel. Witnesses claimed to have seen a man join Laetitia at the end of her shift. One of the clients at the hotel, who had been served by Laetitia that same night, saw her in a bar, the Barbe Blues, at around 10:45 p.m. But that would be the last witness to have seen Laetitia. So it seems impossible to say what happened after this last sighting. But that doesn't stop investigators from continuing. On the contrary, since William, Laetitia's best friend, would bring additional evidence.
He told the police officer that he had spoken to the girl around 11 p.m., first by text message and then by phone. At around 11 p.m., the young man received a message from Laetitia saying,
"I've got something crazy to tell you."
Around midnight, he answered her call, and the young girl made a disturbing revelation. She told him that she had been raped.
She sounded hesitant on the phone, confused, and above all, very scared. It was as if she was trying not to say too much. William overheard music and tried to find out where she was and what she was doing. But when he asked her questions, she decided to end the conversation and hang up. This would be Laetitia's last call, and unfortunately, there wouldn't be any more. In addition to the other testimonies already obtained by the police, the son of the owners of the hotel where the young girl works also gave a statement. He lives in a studio close to his parents' hotel, and that evening, he was relaxing with his friends playing video games. At around 1 a.m, he heard a sound in the street. The noise was loud enough to prompt him to look out the window. He spotted Laetitia in a heated argument, helmet in hand, leaning into the window of a white Peugeot 106. Laetitia got on her scooter, while the other car sped off again, but in the opposite direction of Laetitia. This man was indeed the last person to see Laetitia alive, but nobody knows this man in his 30s, and they have no idea who he could be. For the moment, the police make do with the description given by witnesses. They quickly organize an interrogation of the people present in the bar on the evening of the young woman's disappearance. A huge discovery moves the investigation forward, as the police obtained the name of the owner of this famous white Peugeot 106, Tony Meillon. In fact, he isn't really the owner. The investigators discovered that the vehicle was stolen, and the man they were looking for was a regular in police stations. Born on August 14th, 1979, he already has a 7-page criminal record, including 13 convictions. These include not only minor offenses, but also felonies. Between May 1996 and March 1998, he was in and out of prison for 3, 4, and 6 months, mainly for theft. In 2001, he was sentenced by the Nantes Criminal Court, named the Assize Court, to 5 years imprisonment for the rape of his cellmate while on remand in 1999. He was released 2 years later due to a reduced sentence. In August 2003, he was arrested during a masked armed robbery of 3 stores where he stole narcotics. In June 2005, he was sentenced to 6 years imprisonment. He was released again after only a few years with a reduced sentence. In 2009, he was sentenced to a 1-year imprisonment for the contempt and threatening of a magistrate judge. He was released in February 2010 for good behavior, but this time with a psychological follow-up. Due to the lack of resources, the people in question did not provide this follow-up.
Tony Meillon has just gone from being a mere witness to the prime suspect in the kidnapping of Laetitia Perrais. If he really is involved, investigators believe that they need to act quickly, given the dangerous nature of this individual. A new problem for the police is that the kidnapper has no fixed address. No one knows where to find him. The police are looking for a way to locate him and consider triangulating his position with a cell phone trace.
The only drawback is that it takes a very long time, and for the police, time is of the essence. Laetitia's situation could change at any second. After a thorough investigation, the police come up with a lead. They discovered that among the many places where Tony Meillon could be living, one corresponded perfectly to a hideout, particularly for a kidnapping. Near Arton-en-Retz, Tony's cousin lives with his girlfriend on a large plot of land with a house, a shed, and a caravan. An ideal location for holding someone against their will. Furthermore, this cousin is out of town, giving Meillon total freedom. On Wednesday, January 19th, 2011, at around 11 p.m., the police scouted the area for more information before launching a possible assault. But it was impossible for them to make a move undetected, as the property was equipped with motion lights throughout. They also had watchdogs protecting the property, making it impossible for the police to know whether Laetitia Perrais was in the area. They decided to abandon the search so as not to put Laetitia's life in danger if she was on site. They call in the elite gendarmerie to take charge of the operation, the GIGN, There's no time to lose. Everyone's involved in this operation and joining forces. The town's mayor provides the GIGN with the town's land registry. This way, the operation can be launched as smoothly and as quickly as possible. At 4:30 a.m., the GIGN was in place and ready to enter the property. One goal in mind: apprehending Tony Mayon and finding Laetitia Perrais. But as they headed toward the caravan, one of the GIGN members spots the target. He wasn't in the caravan as they initially thought, but in the main house. Changing strategy, they decide to launch the assault on the house. They place explosives at the front door and set off a large explosion, wounding the suspect in the head, who collapses near the sofa. The suspect is apprehended, and the GIGN doctor ensures that his life is not in danger. He is nevertheless transferred to hospital under GIGN escort. The premises were immediately searched, and the investigators found several illegal items on the premises. The white Peugeot 106 that had been stolen, 700 grams of cannabis resin, a .22 long rifle. But unfortunately, there was still no trace of Laetitia in the house. They decided to search the garden, the caravan, and the shed, but found no trace of the young girl. Nevertheless, the investigators remained convinced that Mayon was involved in the kidnapping of the young woman.
Thank you for watching our video.
We are excited to share these stories with you and to give a voice to the victims worldwide.
If you enjoyed this story,
you can help us out by liking the video, subscribing to our channel, and punching the notification bell.
Very important. Don't forget to give us your opinions in the comments.
Thanks again, and we'll see you next time. Au revoir!
Au revoir!